Hello, in this video I'm covering the game between Alireza Firouzja and Baadur Jobava from round 7 of European Team Championship. The opening was Caro-Kann, and it was interesting to see Alireza from the different side of the board. Here he was white, he was facing Caro-Kann, and he chose the advanced variation, the short with knight f3, and Baadur chose a rather passive approach, h6 to get his bishop to h7 to not allow white to get his bishop pair with knight h4, knight bd2, and now knight d7. In some Firouzja's game as black, he played g5 here. Jobava chose to play more passively, to go knight d7 to be more solid. And now knight b3. A typical maneuver trying to stop queenside actions, to stop c5. Bishop goes to h7 now. And now a4. Now black can play a5 or a6. a5 is weakening b5 potentially because black wants to push c5 at some point. With a5 being played, he's leaving b5 potentially weak. So first he plays a6. Bishop d2, and now queen c7. Rook c1, occupying the c-file, maybe wanting to go c4 at some point, or just to push c3 to hold the center. In case of some c5 that happens. Rook d8. Here he could have played knight c8 simply. Continued his development by bishop e7. In case white plays a5, then maybe even go to a7 and to b5. And then develop castle, but of course, even in this position, black is worse. Rook d8 was played, and now bishop a5. Provoking pawn moves on the queen side, b6, and now bishop b4. Now the a6 pawn is attacked, so he pushes it, and now bishop d6. Queen goes to b7, and now queen d2. Getting his queen towards f4 and starting some kingside action. Knight c8, because bishop on d6 was hindering black's development, now white has to exchange. Knight f8, and now knight e1. Heading towards d3, and now knight e7. Knight d3, but knight d7, now black is preparing to push c5. He switches to the king side. He plays knight f4 because now f6 might become a threat which would break white's center, so he targets e6. So by knight f4 he disables f6, castles, and now rook fe1. Now rook c8, because rook on d8 doesn't do much. Now on c8 it's always preparing c5, but it could have been played immediately in this position. In case of some h4 move, then c4 would be quite strong. And if knight goes back to a1 after b5, black is having a pretty good chance on the queen side, especially with this bishop on h7 lurking on the queen side. But he chose to play rook c8 to prepare even more for c5, c3, and now rook c7. Again, if he played c5, bishop b5, knight c6 would be good, and after rook e3 trying to get some attack on the king side, to take and go knight e7 back to meet rook g3 with knight f5 and to successfully defend the king side. He goes for rook c7, but he has a different idea in his mind. He wants to go queen b8 and get his queen to support the king side. Now white plays g4, not allowing knight f5, queen b8, and now queen e3 was played. Black now goes to d8. For example, here, if black went with b5, he would have a nice counterplay on the queen side. And if white takes, then a4 is very annoying. And in case of knight d2, cb5 would be nice. And even b4 on the next move, which would lead to a very sharp position. But he played queen d8 here, h3, king h8, and now knight d2. He tries to use his knight and to transfer it to the king side, c5, and now bishop b5, using the weakness on b5, knight c6, and now king h2. Preparing some rook g1 and g5 pushes in the future. Black takes on d4, cd, knight b4. Now black wants to exchange pieces because he's lacking some space. And also he wants to use the c-file to occupy the c-file. White takes, and now queen c3. Now the point is, if black takes on c3, he's losing a piece. Because now both knights are under attack and black cannot defend both of them. And also to mention here that queen g3 was much better. Because in case of queen c2, it seems a bit scary to allow this, but after knight f3, now white has g5 next. And even if black takes on b2, now g5 is a very strong move. Black's kingside will have plenty of issues. And if after queen g3 he plays g5 to stop g5 from white, now white gets h5 for his knight. And on the next move he's going to play f4, which is very scary for black. Instead he went for queen c3 and now rook c8, trying to hold the c-file. Now rook c1, attacking this queen, and again, if black takes, now just rook c3. And now black has to surrender the c-file, because if he takes again, he's losing a piece, like in the previous variation. And if he does rook d8, then after rook c7, the position just collapses, because black is going to lose the f7 pawn, after which the e6 pawn is under attack, and knight h5 might come next. For example, this, and next knight h5, and the whole position is very bad. So here, black chose to cover the c-file by playing bishop c2. And now white decides to step away, because now if he takes the queen, he would surrender the c-file. It would not be very good for him, so he switches to the other side. He plays queen g3 now, going for g5 next. Now black defends from this by queen d8, and here white is giving up this bishop because he wants to push g5 next. And here black took on g5. But for example, if he went for something like bishop g6, then after rook c8, queen c8, taking twice, it wouldn't be so good to take on g6, because after queen f8, black would still have some compensation for a lost pawn, because the knight might attack on d4, and it's not so easy to use all the pieces. For example, if king g2, then I think that even queen g7 with the exchanging queens works. Because after this, it's not easy to use the extra pawn, because the knight might make some trouble on the queen side and the king can block the pawn. So I think that ending is quite good for black. If he doesn't take on g6, if he plays queen f4 after g5, then he would give a check, king h7, queen f7, and after king h8, I don't see a clear way for white to continue here. Because black always has some queen c2 ideas which are annoying, knight d3, knight f4, and the position would be quite interesting. Instead, he took on g5 and he opened up the g-file, which was very useful for white. Now he offers a trade, but Alireza declines, and now king g8 to defend the pawn. Knight f3 now. Now knight g5 is a very powerful threat. g6, rook g1. Black goes back to c6, because black needs as many defensive pieces as possible in this situation. Queen h6, and now queen f8, trying to use his queen as a defensive piece. He goes back, and now queen g7. Getting queen closer to the king, but now black allows knight h5. And now we have a very important moment. Black plays queen h6. If he played queen h8, this would be much more resilient, because after knight f6, king g7, queen f4, black would get his pieces somehow into some defensive formation. But still, this position is really ugly to play because of weak dark squares around the king. So here black plays queen h6. White plays a really nice move. He plays rook g4 here. And what is the threat now? If black just goes rook b8 or some other random move, white will go knight f6, king g7, and now he will exchange queens, give a check, and after rook h7, king f8, knight g5 would be very strong, and the f7 pawn is hanging. Also, I think it's a checkmate in a couple of moves, because if you defend it like this, then rook h8, if king e7, then rook e8 checkmate, and if king g7, then this, king h6, and now f4, defending the knight. On the next move, it's going to be knight g4 and rook h8. If bishop f5, then now white has knight e8, and on the next move it's going to be rook h8 checkmate. And if knight d8, then the same story goes. Rook h8 here, rook g8 here, f4. To stop knight g4 he has to play this, but again, knight e8 is a move, rook h8 on the next move. To stop this check, he goes to f8. But now queen f6 is very strong. And the point is that after queen h5, he has rook h4. And black has to give up a queen, because if he doesn't, then he gets checkmated on h8. So black goes knight d8, but now rook h4. And after king g8, he went for knight g5. Jobava plays bishop d1, which finishes the game on the spot. And can you pause the video to find the move which wins the game on spot? The winning move is queen d8. And in this position, Jobava resigned, because if he takes, now white does this, knight f6, and after king g7 he takes on h6, after which king takes, knight f7, he takes the rook, and he's just a piece up. Other moves don't help either. If he didn't play bishop d1, if he played something like bishop f5, again, queen d8 is a threat. There's nothing that could be done except giving up the queen, but that's really hopeless. Black's pieces are really passive, and it wouldn't be much of a fight. That was it. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day. Goodbye.